It's 1970, and a major change is underway. In San Francisco, California, the age of tech is dawning, and with it, an innovative new approach to entrepreneurship is being conceived. Welcome to Silicon Valley. Private equity firms focused on hyper-growth are starting to form, and the concept of venture capital is taking shape. The emergence of these well-endowed, high-risk investors became a beacon of hope after Phil's fast and loose spending in the name of growth had finally caught up with him. The bank was now terminating their relationship. With nothing to lose, Phil's last hope is selling off 30% of the company in an initial public offering. And hoping to attract these new tech-focused VCs, he creates a holding company and names it Sport Tech, offering stock at $2 a share. He printed ads of the offering and was hoping for a $300,000 windfall, but would ultimately have to withdraw it after failing to sell even a single share. He thought to himself, maybe he was just a fool all along to dare chase a dream. But maybe not, because Phil would receive some much-needed help from the most unlikeliest of places. Bob Woodell's parents. They were hardly wealthy, but still withdrew their entire life savings, $8,000, and handed it over to Phil. And in the process, saved the company. Stunned by their unbelievable generosity, Phil asked, why were they doing this? And Mrs. Woodell held his hand and told him, because if you can't trust the company your son is working for, then who can you trust? But all of the money in the world can't buy loyalty. In business, the greatest asset isn't capital. It's leverage. And Phil was about to learn that lesson when Katami visits him and makes an indecent proposal. Onitsuka wants to own 51% of Blue Ribbon, giving them majority control. And Phil must comply or else, as Katami puts it. This can't be happening. A hostile takeover. Phil wants to punch Katami in the face, but holds back and tells him that he needs time to discuss it with his business partner, Coach Bowerman. But it was just a ploy, so Onitsuka would keep sending them shoes while Phil searched for a new supplier. He remembers a factory in Mexico that he heard about during the Olympics. It's an established facility that also makes shoes for Adidas. And all they need from Phil is a name and a logo. He pays Carolyn Davidson $35 to come up with a logo for a brand that doesn't even have a name yet. And he only gives her a vague idea to work with. But she rose to the occasion and handcrafted a masterpiece. She produced a striking design that was both contemporary yet also primal at the same time. Johnson and Woodell were impressed, but Phil wasn't sure. The logo was a far easier choice than picking a name would prove to be. After days of brainstorming, the frontrunners were Falcon, Bengal, Condor, and Phil's suggestion, Dimension 6. The only thing they agreed on was that they had a big problem. But then, one night, a name comes to Johnson in a dream. Nike, the Greek goddess of victory. Phil has reached the deadline for providing the factory with the name, and up to the last minute, he's still not sure what to go with. he's launching a new brand and going up against a friend-turned-foe in a winner-take-all market. Ultimately, Nike, being the goddess of victory, reminded him of Churchill's speech about nothing being more important than that.
You ask, what is our aim? I can answer in one word: victory. Victory at all costs. Victory in spite of all terror. Victory however long and hard the road may be. For without victory there is no survival. Let that be realized.
It's 1972 in Chicago at the National Sporting Goods Association show. It's the premier event attended by manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers of sports equipment from across the country. And it's the site where Nike is officially introduced. It chose orange for the color of their shoeboxes to stand out amidst the sea of white and blue ones used by all of the other brands. And it was working. Curious convention goers flocked to their booth, intrigued by this strange new brand with the groovy logo. What the hell's a Nike? They'd ask. What the hell's a swoosh? Orders for Nike shoes came pouring in, smashing expectations. But it wasn't because of their clever marketing spiel. Vendors gave the new untested brand a chance based purely on the strength of Blue Ribbon's reputation. Phil also secured new funding by connecting with a Japanese trading company. They tried keeping Nike a secret from Onitsuka, but Kitami made another surprise visit to Blue Ribbon's store and found a mountain of orange shoeboxes. Upon discovering their covert operation, Onitsuka immediately terminates its contract with Blue Ribbon. They are now sworn enemies. At the 1972 Summer Olympics, Nike would come out of the gate strong, releasing their own version of the Cortez to rave reviews. But Onitsuka would sue Nike in court over the rights to the immensely popular shoe. The original Cortez was conceived by Coach Bowerman, but sold under Onitsuka's brand. In the end, the judge ruled in favor of Nike, forcing Onitsuka to change the name of their shoe to the Corsair, while still allowing both companies to sell their versions of the disputed shoe, making the Cortez the only shoe in history to be simultaneously sold by two different brands. It's official. The battle lines have been drawn. The humble startup from Portland is now competing with the Japanese juggernaut. Onitsuka had more money, more credibility, and a longer history of making shoes. But what they didn't have was pure American ingenuity. By the age of 19, he had made the cover of Sports Illustrated. And by 24, he was already dead. But in that short time, he still left an unforgettable impact on the sports world. He was Steve Prefontaine from Eugene, Oregon, a ferocious runner who trained under Coach Bowerman and captivated the nation while taking Nike along with him on the ride of a lifetime.
Measured in numbers, he was a success. 7 NCAA titles, every American record between 2 and 10,000 meters, undefeated on his home track over a mile. But more, Pre was a phenomenon. He stood for individualism, rebellion, and the pure joy of competition.
At 21 years old, Pre was headed to the '72 Olympics in Munich, Germany, as the youngest competitor on the track. And as an aggressive frontrunner, he was poised to bring home the gold. For Pre, racing was all about determining who had the most heart on the field, while his more experienced opponents relied on tactical strategies to ensure victory.
Well, I think everybody knew my plan. For me to win a race against competition of that nature, I have to go out hard and just about lead from the start, because the runners in that field are all runners that hang on and then outkick you at the last. So my tactics was just to go strong and run the first 3/4 of a mile hard and then just hang on the last quarter.
In the end, his intensity would be neutralized by the wily veterans.
This is the final lap. And the American attacks on the outside, but Gammoudi responds. Viren there, and these three now. 7-8 metres clear of Ian Stewart, and these are the medal men. 200 metres left. The champion Gammoudi leads. Viren moves up inside Prefontaine. The Finn and the American gathering for the final attack. And here comes Viren chasing his second gold medal. Viren goes for home. Gammoudi is bankrupt. So too is Prefontaine. And the Finn goes in now for his second gold medal, and Stewart with a late run. The Finn wins. Gammoudi second. Stewart gets the bronze. Prefontaine dies in the final stride.
Even though he suffered a heartbreaking loss, his gutsy performance on the world stage cemented his status as a living legend. Back home, Pre was also causing a ruckus by speaking out against the American Athletic Union. The AAU prohibited amateur athletes from making money through endorsements. In order to remain eligible for the Olympics, Pre was reduced to surviving on food stamps and began publicly criticizing the organization's treatment of amateur athletes, calling for its reform. And he'd soon find an ally. Phil Knight wanted to help and created a job at Nike just for him. Pre became their National Director of Public Affairs, an intentionally ambiguous title that enabled the company to keep him on the payroll. He already loved the product and unabashedly promoted the company everywhere he went. His belief in Nike ran so deep, he even allowed Coach Bowerman to use his foot as a cast for a new shoe. The University of Portland had recently updated its running facilities with the same polyurethane coating used on Olympic tracks. But Coach Bowerman's runners were having trouble on it. Their shoes weren't able to grip the surface very well. The coach was at a loss for a solution. Until one Sunday morning, while in his kitchen, watching his wife make breakfast, Coach has a crazy thought. He became transfixed by the waffle iron and decides to take it into the garage, where he then proceeds to pour shoe batter on it. The waffle trainer is born. Prior to its release, for over 50 years, the soles of running shoes had remained flat. The waffle trainer had protruding nubs on the bottom, creating extraordinary grip. It was a monumental achievement in footwear from a company that was just getting started. In May of 1975, Pre organized a tour of races that concluded in his hometown. He would win the 5,000 meter that day. Later that night, Pre would meet with friends to celebrate. He was taking running into the mainstream while training hard towards redeeming himself at the upcoming Olympics. But tonight was all about cutting loose and having fun. After the party, it was time to go home. Steve Prefontaine would tragically pass away in a car accident after driving under the influence. He was 24. His shocking death was not only a massive blow to the sports world, but it would be an even bigger loss to his friends and family. When Pre was 8 years old, his big sister came home and found him hitting his head against the wall and crying. He told her, "I'm stupid and I'm dumb and I'm never going to do anything right." She just held him and said, "Honey, someday you're going to find something you can do. And when you find it, that'll be your gift." Years later, she witnessed him running in front of large crowds with the people all stomping their feet and yelling, "Pre, Pre, Pre!" And she began to cry because she realized he'd finally found his gift. He was a son of Oregon, the pride of America, and the superstar athlete that put Nike on the map. And even though his life was cut short, his spirit would live on through Nike, because legends never die. It's 1977, and American shoe brands are growing frustrated with Nike's surging popularity. While the brash upstart is busy kicking up major dust, the competition is even busier, digging up major dirt. One of Nike's main advantages was its business model of importing lower-cost shoes from overseas manufacturers. But Made in America brands Keds and Converse joined forces after discovering a loophole in the tax code that they could use to destroy Nike. It was called the American Selling Price, an old protection-era law taxing shoe imports not by their factory cost, but by the wholesale cost of similar American shoes. Keds and Converse began lobbying the US government to impose the American Selling Price on all shoe importers in general, with Nike in particular, in a shrewd strategy to try and sink the encroaching brand. With the stroke of a pen, overnight, Nike's import duty spiked from 50 cents a pair to an unbelievable $6 a pair. And worse, customs applied the tariff retroactively, going back 3 years. Phil Knight is staring at an invoice so excessive it could effectively bankrupt Nike. He flies to Washington and secures a meeting with an official at the Treasury Department to try and get the bill waived. Phil presents paperwork already approved by the Treasury that exempts Nike from the American Selling Price. It's going to be a long day in DC. Phil tried arguing that Nike was being unfairly targeted by jealous competitors using an outdated law, but the inspector is unmoved. Unable to make any headway, Phil decides to just get real and have a heart-to-heart with the man, informing the nice agent that this bill, in all honesty, would put Nike completely out of business. After a long, dramatic pause, the official finally responds. Yet again, Nike is in a fight for its very survival. It previously vanquished Onitsuka, but this time around they would have to go up against a far more formidable foe, the federal government. And this time, they're faced with a legal obstacle so insurmountable that they can't get around it. This time it's going to take more than hope or luck. It's going to take an actual plan. But not just any plan. They would need to come up with something so bold, so drastic, something so utterly preposterous that it could even qualify to be considered crazy enough to work. A diabolical plot by its competitors has Nike marked for death. But Phil Knight isn't going down without a fight. Nike is clashing with the US government in court over their tax liability. And with nothing to lose, Phil concocts a super sketchy plan to beat his competitors at their own game. What if they created a fake shoe company and used an American factory to make an incredibly cheap knockoff and price it just slightly above cost? Then customs would have no choice but to apply the American selling price to Nike imports based on their own bogus shoe. It was such an absurd idea that his employees initially thought he was joking. But the more they thought about it, the more it began sounding like maybe it was actually worth a try. But for this caper to work, the phony brand not only needed to appear legit on paper, its product would also have to look the part. Borrowing from the design of their Oceania model, Nike would forge their own shoe. They spun up the One line, complete with its own logo and sparing no expense, even produced a fake catalog to go with it. This was it. It had all come down to this. Nike was attempting an unbelievably outlandish scheme to escape the guillotine. It was a long shot, a desperate Hail Mary. But would it, could it, actually work? Shockingly, the insane risk miraculously paid off. Customs actually began using the One line to assess import duty on Nike, reducing its tax burden by 2/3. Nike would spend the next few years in court fighting to get their tax liability dismissed, and eventually got it reduced from $25 million down to $9 million. And that amount was no problem, because by that time, they had already gone from near bust all the way to the moon. It's the late 70s, and NASA's preparing to enter an exciting new era by launching the Space Shuttle program. With astronomical funding, they were able to push the boundaries of space exploration further than ever before. At the time, aerospace engineer Frank Rudy was working on helmets with a process called blow rubber molding that involved placing dense gases inside rubber pouches. It was during his work on this project that Rudy would make a startling discovery. These pressurized airbags could also provide the perfect cushioning for running shoes. It was a wild idea, but if it could actually work, then it just might be the future. The space age was in full force, ushering in a new wave of innovation as mankind was hurtling towards the cosmos on a mission of discovery, seeking a new frontier of uncharted territory with the promise of limitless possibilities. And with it, Nike was about to boldly go where no company had gone before. While running was understood to be a healthy activity, it still posed risks. On average, runners' feet hit the ground 100 times per minute, with each impact taking a heavy toll on the joints. But Frank Rudy was convinced he had the perfect solution. The result was a breakthrough so innovative, it was revolutionary. He pitched his patented invention to 23 shoe companies, including Adidas, but was rejected by every single one of them. And when he finally presented it to Nike, he was once again met with the same resistance. Phil Knight just wasn't interested. The futuristic concept of air soles seemed like a cheesy gimmick, something out of a comic book instead of a legitimate technological advancement. But Frank managed to convince Phil to at least try them on and go for a run first. While their waffle trainer helped keep athletes' feet firmly to the ground, this new shoe would, believe it or not, have them walking on air. Phil went for an exhilarating 6-mile run and returned with a different view. They agreed to a deal that would pay Frank Rudy 15 cents for each pair sold. A year later at the Honolulu Marathon, Nike introduced the world to the Tailwind, the first shoe to utilize Frank Rudy's state-of-the-art air sole, a concept that was simply out of this world. The tailwind was a marvel of technological innovation never before experienced by runners, ushering in the next generation of footwear. But it would be the arrival of a once-in-a-lifetime athlete from a different sport that would take Nike Air into the stratosphere.